And also, I mean, the 50s, it was an incredible austerity period in everything. We were short of everything, mostly because we'd hocked ourselves to America in order to pay for the war.
Yes, yeah.
And therefore, a small amount of escapism, which people got from thrillers. And some people had the most amazing war. And for some people, it was the most exciting thing they'd ever done and were ever going to do. Was to be involved,
especially women.
Especially women.
Yeah. Doing something like films, it was like black and white. He wasn't worried about that.
Oh no, and that was pure escapism.
Yeah.
But I tried, I have to confess, because I remember reading the Ian Fleming books years ago and loving them, and I tried to go back to them recently, and let's just say some of his attitudes towards women don't age well. His idea of consensual sex is a little bit on the dodgy side. Okay. If you pat me on the head, I may break something.
Yeah, the reaction to the austerity, absolutely. Because I can remember where and when I grew up, the idea, you know, James Bond was in Jamaica, he was in the Bahamas, and so on. And the idea that I would ever go there, they would have locked me up. It was just ludicrous. There was no possibility of ever dreaming of going to such a place. So you read it because it was absolutely an escape.
He was the first jet set hero because he travelled by jet. I mean, and I think it's Live and Let Die. It's one of the first jet crossings of the Atlantic, commercial flights, and he's on it. It's almost like going in Concorde.
And as soon as we got into the 60s, you know, London suddenly became the capital of the world as far as fashion and music, and it was an incredibly exciting time in the 60s.
It was. World War II ended in 1963. But the guy that I would choose is Alistair MacLean, who, the opposite of James Bond really, was very firmly rooted in the past, very old, traditional type of characters and type of virtues. Heavily based in wartime experience, but really trending backward rather than forward. You know, no Alistair MacLean hero would probably ever mention going in a jet plane. They would be travelling in a submarine or some kind of ketch or trawl that MacLean would describe in love and detail.
Yeah, James Bond is a softie compared to MacLean.
But also those earlier books, Alistair MacLean, there was very little love interest.
None at all.
And let's say girl Jeffrey Jenkins, I mean, the woman, the female interest and love interest came in on page 203 right towards the end, and then she gets killed. It's a bit, actually, well, how many people are going to be reading a submarine book? Maybe, because I'm
Ice Stations Ever is one of the great submarine books of all time.
And James Law seems to be doing very well with submarine books.
Yeah.
So.
Well, things coming in out of fashion, like submarines. So, and as you just said, Zoe, it was the time gradually got to the 60s. Things were booming in Britain. It was the cultural centre of the world, and lots of these guys who wrote thrillers were really at the centre of that. They were treated like rock stars in a way that I don't think many authors are today, or don't feel they are. But yeah, they were in all the colour supplements and the front covers. They had exciting gigs jetting around the world. They really were stars, weren't they?
Well, Lee still lives like that. Clearly, we know this.
I did like to mention it in case you got jealous.
Well, I mean, I've been in a jet plane.
Yeah, I had to sit at the back next to the tail gunner.
Well, they still have seats back then. It was, I think, not just thriller writers though, but there was a thing called a public intellectual in the old days that you could count on for comment or for an opinion. They were valuable, and they were typically often writers, often serious writers, but yeah, also thriller writers. And there was something glamorous about it. The idea that you would move to Jersey to avoid income tax was extremely glamorous. I mean, the idea of having enough money to need to do that was a fantasy.
It was Ireland first, because the Irish laws favoured artists and writers, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But then when Ireland got too expensive, 23% tax, then you moved to Jersey or Guernsey.
Well, it was relatively recent in Ireland they got rid of that exemption, that if you earned your living from the creative arts and lived in Ireland, you paid no income tax at all. and they, after U2 exploited that ruthlessly, they put a cap on it. But of course, the downside of that is you've got to live in Ireland.
Another reason to hate you two, anyway. Yes, we're back to the submarines. And everybody who was literate, basically, once the thrillers were booming, everyone who was literate had to go and write one, didn't they? All journalists thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a shift as well. As Lee said, the war ended around 1963. I mean, there's still an awful lot of ex-Nazis to track down. But and you know, they were very well dressed thanks to Hugo Boss. But there was the new style, the swinging 60s. I mean, you have Len Day, John Le Carre. Okay, Le Carre didn't swing so much, you know, but he was still around, he's still going. But Len Day was seen as the cool one. There was a wonderful review of it. I mean, one day Len Dayton's books would be read aloud by large women in a jazz club or something. I never really understood, but it sounded great. And then you had people like Freddie Forsyth coming on, and one or two others who were exceptionally good. One of the throwbacks to the war was a guy called Ted Oldbury, who was just a fantastic writer. Really was good, and he actually really did do the business during the war and afterwards as a spy, and it was a fantastic career. But his book was well worth the cover. And there were innovators like Anthony Price, who again
Freddie Forsyth I absolutely loved, and because I thought Day of the Jackal was like year zero. It was a reset for thrillers. It really totally changed the game. And it was a fascinating book in the literary sense in that we all knew how it came out, and yet we knew that de Gaulle was not killed. And yet the how was he not killed was fascinating. But what I truly remember about that book is economics, inflation, because there's a great scene in that book where the Jackal is eventually recruited, and they say, this is your task to kill de Gaulle. And he says, well, if I do that, I'll never be able to work again. You know, I'll have to retire after that. I'll have to live the whole rest of my life somewhere without working, so I'm going to need, at least $500,000. I had to try and describe David Jack to a creative writing class once. And I said, think of it this way. You know it didn't happen, right? Halfway through the book, you're thinking, maybe I missed that lesson at school. I was off that way. Maybe de Gaulle really did get assassinated. And 3/4 of the way through the book, you're going, he's going to do it. He's really going to do it. 9/10 of the way through, shoot the bastard, shoot it! And then right at the end, you suddenly realise you're cheering for the wrong guy.
As well, I think that was one of the early thrillers that really brought in this authenticity, because Frederick Forsyth in that book exposed a method of acquiring a passport under a false name by going around a graveyard and finding a child who died very young and using the birth certificate, because nothing was computerized obviously, using the birth certificate in order to apply for a passport. And that loophole was not closed for years, only very recently. So I think the authenticity was something that people suddenly were reading these thrillers and they felt they were learning inside tricks and inside secrets. And one of the first thriller writers I read was Arthur Haley as well. And they were great big, blockbuster books full of technical detail. And the first one of those came about because he'd been a pilot during the war and he was on a commercial flight and he suddenly thought, well, if both the pilots were taken ill, could I land this plane? And that was Flight into Danger, which was his first hit book. And after that, they became,
Yes.
bigger.
I just wonder if the rest of you agree with what Lee said, that as well as the tradecraft in the books, if you read them now, they are like a time capsule of attitudes and trivia about the times in which they were written. It's another thing we can enjoy them for now, years later.
Well, very much so. I mean, certainly, if you take Wilbur Smith, today, he was terribly sexist, but that's of his time. And Zoe and I were talking about this earlier, and